Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a special guest coming on today. He plays over 5 instruments. Can you guess the exact number of instruments that he does play, though? Intro, play. Boop, 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 boop. He's gonna join at some point, making noise while the intro plays. It's Baxter! Baxter Dent,
Reginald Waddle.
lane house captain, an avid member of the SRC, Interact, AV crew, multiple college bands, the lead trombonist in the college musical last year. Baxter Dent, on all those accomplishments, how many instruments do you play?
Reggie, the last count was done 2 years ago, and it was 23. Since then, I've learnt to play, off the top of my head, the Jews harp and the saxophone. So at least 25.
25 instruments.
Yeah,
I
not to
mean,
say that I play them well, but I can give them a red hot go.
red hot go. Would you say you would be able to play a song on all those instruments?
Oh, no doubt.
No
Yeah.
doubt. So, Baxter, if you don't mind, how'd you get into your musical professions or your musical interests?
Look, it certainly helped that my mum, her background is in music. She was a pianist by trade for many years. She went to this Conservatorium of Music up here in Brisbane. And then she started her teaching career in primary and a little bit of secondary. And then that sort of shifted into just teaching piano. And then just teaching piano shifted into just teaching classroom with 1 day of piano. And yeah, I think just being surrounded by music since I was born, God, it made such a difference. And the defining point was that my parents forced me to take piano lessons when I was like, 2, 3, 4 years old. Like, seriously, too young to be playing piano. But but they forced me to, and I got frustrated. But like, just having that foundational understanding of kind of music and getting it all under the fingers, it's just made everything else from there on so much easier. That, I mean, that's the origin story, you know.
Oh, so sorry if I misheard, but piano would have been your first instrument you learnt then, I imagine.
Piano was the first instrument that I had any measure of skill at, but violin was the first instrument that I would say I like properly played and applied myself to.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, would you find yourself now a bass player?
Oh yeah, every day, man.
A bass.
Bass.
So, how do you think that pathway led to there?
So we started out with violin. Violin, beautiful instrument, served me so well for many, many years. Then we come to grade 4.
Mm-hmm.
And in grade 4 at school, there was an instrumental program, and you had to pick an instrument. By grade 4 at school, I was doing like grade 3 violin. So basically, with instruments, you have preliminary, which is the equivalent of like, just getting yourself started on the instrument. And then you have grade 1s through 8 of like skill levels, and then you start doing letters and it becomes much more fun. But anyway, 1 through 8, and I was at 3. So you could argue I was like, 40% of the way through my musical journey on the violin. I didn't want to really be with the kids who couldn't play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Like that,
Yeah.
I couldn't picture myself staying in that. That would just frustrate me to no end. I wouldn't do that. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn a new instrument. And so I put my name down for the trombone. And gee, I went all right at trombone. Like, I was, it was a brand new instrument, never touched the thing before, but yeah, I was blitzing everyone, like to the point where I got moved up from the like lower class. I say lower class. I got moved up from the quote beginners class to the quote intermediate class within a term, I think, and so like 10 weeks. And
So what was
then
that typically for a normal student? Or
they didn't get moved up. That's what was typical. So so I got moved up after like a term or 10 weeks or whatever. And then I could literally show up to like these group lessons having not touched the instrument since the last group lesson, and I could just like sight read, you know, pages and pages and pages
Mhm.
beyond everyone else. And in a progressive book like it was, when they're doing piece like number 3, say, and I'm doing piece like 50 just looking at it and playing, pretty good. So then trombone, we're almost getting to the bass player, don't worry about it. Then from trombone, the only thing that I struggled with was sometimes in my head I would confuse violin notes with trombone notes.
Mhm.
So obviously that was kind of a big issue because if I was going to be this, you know, big famous trombone
Yeah.
player or whatever, I couldn't be hitting the wrong note every second time. And so I thought, well, I need to clearly pick up another instrument that, you know, has that lower register that can read those lower notes.
Oh.
Why not bass guitar? So I picked up bass and I was fortunate enough to have a fantastic bass teacher to just get me started on the whole road. And like 2 or 3 lessons in, I'd like forgotten my bass or something happened. But anyway, he just said, "That's all right. We'll just listen to some cool bass lines." And he played for the next 30 minutes, you know, all of these just phenomenal bass lines. I couldn't even tell you what they were, but what I do remember is walking back to class that day, and people say like their jaw dropped when they experienced something phenomenal.
Mhm.
I literally could not shut my mouth after this experience. It was that like transformational, and then from then on, I've just been hooked. Like, yeah, that's the full story.
Cool. That's really interesting to hear. On that note, though, you said you had
Nice
an
pun.
amazing um.
Sorry, I threw you off. That's my fault.
It's all good. Um, you said you had an amazing bass teacher. Why was that? Was it due to his unique teaching style, or s- was it a trait that you admired or something?
So, what made Mr. David Moon different? Number one, we'd already had like a bit of a relationship just because, you know, being the kid that I was down in music what felt like constantly, what I now realize was like, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. But we already like kind of knew each other a little bit. And so it's not like I was walking in there with a stranger. That was helpful because it was a very like loose environment. And then what that loose environment allowed for was I could play any piece that I wanted with him, and he was cool. He taught me the fundamentals, and he did it effectively. He taught me everything correctly. He had flawless technique himself. It's just that it was limited technique, but I mean, he taught me all the fundamentals, and I think I just came across a quote today. Uh, the only rule is the basics are the basics, and you can't beat the basics. So he just gave me such a phenomenal platform, not only with technique for the instrument, but also for like perspective and a platform for where I could take the instrument if I so desired. Which, I mean, we look at me now and it's clear that I desire to. It's just not clear that I can. But you know, he just provided that platform for me to be able to do whatever I wanted to or needed to fulfill myself with bass.
Okay. So would you say, if any of those traits, did any of those stick to you, or did you reevaluate them in yourself? Do you see any of those traits within yourself now?
Do I see any of Moons' traits in me? We're very different people, and
Hmm.
I don't mean this in any sort of disparaging way to Mr. Moon because, as I say, he's a phenomenal person. I love him to death, and he got me started on this whole journey. But Mr. Moon, if I had to describe him, I would describe him as being a fairly rudimentary, basic. Comprehensive. I will say comprehensive, but he's very rudimentary, basic. Get it right. Don't do anything too complex. Just make sure that you can play it. He's that style of person. I am
Okay.
not. Like, I look for challenge, and I don't prefer failing. No one prefers failing, but
Mhm.
for me, I feel like a failure is more valuable than a success in the sense of when you succeed at something, you kind of just like have a bit of a party, woohoo, great success, it's all over. When you fail at something, you get like so many more learning experiences and stuff. And as I say, I don't prefer failure. I much prefer success. But if like, say for the next 3 years, talking about like, for the rest of my life, but let's say the next 3 years, if I could never have a single success in that 3 years and know that it sets me up for, infinite
Jesus.
successes later, I would take any failure that I could have the opportunity to experience right now,
Okay,
which is
so
so very different to Moonza, but that's just how I'm at. So,
so it allowed you to contrast some traits between you and him, and then allowed you to develop in a direction that you might have not taken beforehand?
not quite.
Or were these
Me
traits
and
already coming from somewhere?
myself in grade 7 is very different to myself now, I think it's fair to say.
Mhm.
Um, I think back on my grade 7 self, and my grade 7 self was entirely a product of his environment. So, me in grade 7, I hadn't thought about myself. I hadn't thought about my psyche. I hadn't thought about my values or what I wanted to do in life. I was just kind of there. I existed in grade 7, and any sort of values or morality or thoughts on the future that I might have had were entirely dictated by my environment. So at the time in grade 7, I definitely shared some of the traits with Moonza because he was in my environment. He was a big part of it. But now more and more I've kind of like just drifted away from the kind of traits that Moonza has. And as I say, it's not to disparage him in any way. It's just that is the direction that my life has ended up taking.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question somewhat,
No,
but
no, no.
I don't
That
think that
does.
it does.
So what would you say one of the leading influences of your current personality is then, or your current charactership?
Where do I begin? um,
Any way you feel confident.
oh, of course. Look, we'll start with the most recent, and I think we'll work our way backwards. So the
Okay.
most recent thing that influenced my view of myself, my morality, my sort of internal compass was this book right here, Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. And the thing about this book that I love, aside from, all of the like little cool quotes that you get out of it, is sort of towards the second half of the book. So like page 300, 400, it starts getting into values and like where kind of your moral compass lies. And that so very profoundly affected me. And I genuinely do think that from the start of the exercise where you just list out your values as they currently stand, I did keep the list, but I don't have it on me. But from the start of the exercise where you just list out all your values as they currently stand, and you just, oh yes, I do in fact value money, and I do love people, and I have a bit of spirituality in me, and you order them in importance, right? So you say, oh, my number one value is love or integrity or honesty or whatever.
Hmm.
And that's all very well and good, but the fun comes when it's like you start questioning what your values are and you start trying to influence where they are. So, for instance, what never was on my list of values before was spirituality. Spirituality to me was just like a null cause. It was, yes, I like a bit of spirituality. I don't value it in any way. But then you kind of ask the question, number one, what does it cost me to have this belief where it currently is, which is non-existent on the list? So what does it cost me personally to not have spirituality? I miss so much on music, like music without some sort of energy and spirituality and like that connection between yourself and your audience. It's such a vital component of music. You can't really have it without it. Is my belief. You can't have like a extremely good one without having some form of spirituality. Then that's my thought anyway. And then you ask, okay, well, where should it be for me to create the life that I want? And on my big list of values, it comes about 10th. And so then the goal from there is just to craft your life in such a way that you start putting spirituality as your 10th most important thing in your life. And like, I've read this book multiple times, and every time I come away with a different set of values that I need to incorporate to live my best life. And so that's where my most sort of recent recreation, let's say, came from. Another really impactful one before that, coincidentally, the first time that I read the book, was, gosh, it was about this time, yeah, a shade under 12 months ago. But my girlfriend of the time, broke things off with me. Honestly, fair enough. But like, God, I look back at myself then and I'm like, no. But and fair enough. Yeah, and that was such a tectonic shift for me. Like, that really informed a whole lot of my values. That earlier I was saying, like, the whole I would love to fail as much as possible in the next 3 years to get successful. That one epic fail on my part, that one just whole train wreck really on my part, because I was, oh God, and let's not go into that. But anyway, that one train wreck, I learnt so much about myself, so much about like, relationships, so much about the world at large. And that really was a transformative experience. And then the one before that, let's just gloss over that one.
Okay.
The one before that was, I spent 5 days in a group choir, and our conductor was Jason Barry Smith. And Jason, he has this idea of energy. And the way that he demonstrated it was, he pointed at the kid who like already kind of got it, like, who was a bit, like one of the sort of more woo-woo kids, I guess you could call them. And he said, send me some energy. And so the kid, like, it was really great the way that he explained it. The kid literally, like, as though it was a football, kind of like threw him some energy. And then he just sticks his hand out, like, stop. And the whole room, you could just feel like it went from, oh, something's happening, to, oh, there's nothing happening. And the way that he kind of went from there was, okay, now instead of me stopping that energy, let me embrace that energy, throw me some more. And the kid, gets another football of like energy or whatever metaphysical, emotional cocktail of body language or modality you want to think of it as. But he summons up his little football that he throws. And this time he bounces back as though he was literally hit in the chest by a football. And while I still don't fully like the idea of a metaphysical force that exists entirely separately to like science and understanding and like, what we can visibly see and everything, that idea of energy, as far as like, I can be happy, and then that happiness will influence the people around me to be happy. But then if someone sends happiness to me and I'm like, no, I'm not happy, then it just kills all of that happiness. That idea really influenced me at a time in my life where I was kind of in a depressed state. I wasn't depressed, but I was like really operating at sort of a low state at that point. So
You're in the trough of
those
the
are my
sun
three.
function.
Indeed, I was, Reggie. So those are my three defining, like most defining experiences as far as my personality and my views and stuff.
Okay. So in that case, then, let's rewind a little.
Yeah.
Thinking back, when you're making your list of core values, which somehow the rewind is more recent in your life than what you're speaking about just before,
How very
uh,
strange.
you were writing some attributes and core values that you find in
Mm.
yourself. What do you think your number one value would be, though?
I'll read you off the whole list because I always carry it around.
Well, what's your top one and why?
No, I'll read you off the list.
Okay.
And I'll just go through it because I'm sure that you've already noticed, but like this sort of creation of one's personality and living a
Is
life by
multifaceted.
design instead of by default, I'm so very, 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 very passionate about it, and I just want to share as much as I can. So,
Okay.
my number one value is health. My personal physical, mental, emotional health, that is my number one.
Mhm.
Because if that falls off the perch, if I don't have my health, everything else just can't fit into place. It's like trying to shove, a square peg in a round hole. It's just not going to work if the health is not there. So that's why, once a day minimum, I'll always do something that I feel will increase my strength, or I'll increase my flexibility, or I'll go for a run, try to get some endurance in me, or I'll just do little things just to always make sure that my health is coming numero uno. Second on the list is integrity. And I put integrity second because the person that I want to become is a person who they're always true to their values. It's easy. It's so very easy to live a life where you can forego your values just to get present pleasure, or instead of living by your values, you're just going to relieve tension, and you're just going to do whatever you need to in that moment to be free of tension. Not quite my strong suit. I'd much prefer to live a life of integrity, even if it came at the cost of everything else.
So
So
if I may just interlude there,
please.
What would you say your greatest? This may be a hard question, so feel free if you're not comfortable to answer. What would you say
Answering anything.
your greatest fall of integrity would be?
My greatest fall of integrity? Oh,
I know this is a hard one, and feel free not to
look,
answer.
I'm certain that there have been bigger ones and more potent ones in my life, but the one that stands out as soon as you ask that question, the one that stands out to me, even now, and it was such a dumb little thing, but the one that stands out for me now when I failed at integrity was back in grade 2. I used to do swimming back in the day, and I was going to get changed in the pool. And then in the bathrooms, I don't know, some kid in like grade 5 or whatever was messing with me, and we were just like running around the change rooms, whatever. And he had like a $20 note, or $10 note or something, and I was not a great child back in grade 2, I have to be honest. And so I was like being a nuisance, running around yelling after him, trying to grab this $20 note off him, or whatever denomination it was. And I was just being an all-round noisy nuisance. And then after like 5 or 10 minutes of this, there comes a knock at the door. And a teacher yells in, "Oi, whoever's in there, come out now." And so at that moment, we both kind of solemnly trot out, and he says, "What's going on in there? What's all the noise?" And at that moment, my not great grade two self just decides to lie and says, "I was just going to the bathroom," and somehow that excuse of "I was just going to the bathroom," um, I ended up getting away with it. The kid in grade 5 obviously pleaded his case. It was like, no, he was, like, chasing me around the bathrooms or whatever, and, for whatever reason, that teacher just happened to believe me and not this kid in grade 5, and so this kid in grade 5 really just copped it, and I got off scot-free, and, like, still to this day, I haven't thought about this in a long while, but, like, when you ask that question of when my integrity has lapsed, that is just the first instant that comes to mind, and it still pains me to this day that I would do something like that. I just thank goodness I'm a different person now. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So since integrity is such an important thing to you today now, how do you think integrity fits in with your role as a leader at the college? May it be any of your roles, but in particular,
Yeah.
lane house captain.
Well, integrity is staying true to oneself, one core values, one core belief. It's being honest to what you think is right. That's what integrity is in, my own words, my own definition. So, and this applies to all of my leadership roles, but as you say, I'm just going to focus on the house captain one for the moment. But anything that I do as a house captain, it's coming from a place of I want this to line up with my core values. And so that means a couple of things in the practical sense. For me, that means if someone proposes something, and this has happened, but if someone proposes something that I don't agree with, that for whatever reason just doesn't line up with my values, I have to feel obliged to say no. And saying no is not an easy thing for me to do, but I think that not just Lanehouse, but a lot of possibly bad things have been avoided just by living off that integrity. And this isn't to say that other people don't have, any level of integrity. That's not what I'm saying at all. But me living with my values in the current arrangement that they're in, it produces very different results to some of the to other people who are I'm sure that they're staying true to their values as well within the hierarchy that those values are in for them. But me staying true to my values, it means I have to say no to a lot of stuff, but it also means if someone comes to me with something that doesn't cross any of my values that seems a-okay to me, then I'm fully comfortable in just being able to back it 100% and not have a second thought about it. So that's how it kind of comes across in a lot of the leadership domains, but specifically with the house captains.
Okay. And would you also describe that as the hardest part of your role then?
Oh yeah, saying no is just not my strong suit, but I don't think it's anyone's strong suit, so I'm in good company.
Okay. um, in that case, then, do you would do you see any other? Well, sorry, let me rephrase this. What do you think, apart from integrity, or maybe not instead of integrity, what do you think the core value is to a leader other than integrity?
To me,
Yeah, to you.
and this might not apply to anyone else, but in as far as I can tell, obviously, I've already said it. Number one is health. Right, the leader can't put themselves at risk in any way, mentally, physically, emotionally, to serve others. That's just not a sustainable strategy. It might work for a week, it won't work for long. So health is obviously number one. I think integrity we've already talked about. I think that passion and compassion are the other two most crucial ingredients, if you want to call them ingredients, for a successful leader. It's passion, being able to understand that when you commit to something, you need to be fully committed to it, and compassion, being loving to, yourself and others, and working in everyone's best interest. I think that those two, health is number one. Health is always number one. But if you can act with passion and compassion, whether in the leadership arena or anywhere, you will always come out on top. And that is my true, firm belief.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Baxter. So, multifaceted musician, plays a wide array of instruments, multi-service layered, and also currently the Lane House captain. Baxter Dent, do you feel successful?
No, not even close. It's look, Reggie. There are a number of things that I am excruciatingly unsuccessful in. And I don't need to go into gory detail now, but I have my life. I can't say I have it planned out because nothing goes to plan. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's the quote. But my life design, I suppose, starts when I'm 25.
Mm-hmm.
Everything up to 25 is more or less just preparation. 25 onwards is when we start to see success in my life. So there are certainly some things that I'm successful in. Do I see myself as a whole being successful? I have not achieved one thing that I have set my sort of life goals to, and I'm not even close in any of the arenas. So I'm going to say absolutely not. I am not a successful human being.
Okay,
Yeah,
on that note,
yes, being the key word.
yeah. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Baxter Dent, Lane House captain, and this has been Meeting the Hosts.
Thanks for having me, Reg.
Pleasure.